Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Sullivan. When you came to Juneau last year, you met with the minority caucus in the House, and we expressed our concern about the way then candidate Trump was talking about Russia and its potential aggression towards our NATO allies. You reassured us. You said that you knew that there was no president in history who'd been tougher on Russia than President Trump, and that the media had been misrepresenting that issue. But now we see President Trump negotiating with Vladimir Putin, who is a war criminal that we should be bringing to justice, not inviting back into the G7. And a couple of days ago on Fox News, we heard President Trump doubling down on making Canada a 51st state, describe Canada, quote, one of the nastiest countries, end quote. Senator, how are you pushing back on the White House in this whiplash-inducing change in foreign policy regarding the two countries that border our great state? Thank you.
So I'll send you that article. I'm not sure I said the biggest pushback against Russia in history, but I'll resend you the article, the op-ed I wrote in the Washington Post, which said, hey, the narrative was Obama was a lot stronger against Russia than Trump was first term. And I wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and I can send it to all of you guys saying, that's ridiculous. Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the power, right? Obama slashed defense spending by 25%. He crushed one thing that Putin's really scared of, American energy. He wouldn't give the Ukrainians Javelin missiles. He gave them blankets and MREs after the invasion in 2014. Trump got in and immediately gave them Javelins. We increased our troop presence in the Baltics and Poland. Obama wouldn't do that. Trump did with the support of Congress. And in Syria, where we had Russians that we knew were moving towards our special forces, the Wagner Group and others, they got too close to our soldiers. We warned the Russian generals who were in charge of these guys, hey, don't get any closer to our special forces in Syria. We're going to take action. They didn't listen. We unleashed hell on these Russians, 8-hour engagement, killed hundreds. And the Russian general finally called back after a 10-hour battle saying, they're not our soldiers, but please, can you stop killing them? Okay. I don't think President Obama would ever do anything like that. So that's Trump's first term record. My own record, as you know, I was a strong supporter of the National Security Supplemental last year. Matter of fact, I reshaped that when it came from the Biden administration to not just focus on Russia, Ukraine, but focus on the other authoritarian countries in the world, China, Iran, to bolster that, to make sure we had support for Israel and a support for Taiwan. We reshaped that bill. I led the efforts in many ways, and that's one of the reasons why that bill passed. And I've been a strong supporter of all of our allies or partners who are fighting back against authoritarian aggression, whether it's in Indo-PACOM with China and Xi Jinping, whether it's Israel and our Gulf Arab allies in Iran, or whether it's with regard to Russia and Ukraine. Look, I think what's happening now is the president has been putting an enormous amount of effort into bringing this war to a close, as he said, that is what he campaigned on, that he would focus on doing that. You know, it can be distasteful. I agree with you with regard to Putin, but, you know, if you look at Ronald Reagan, you know, spoke with the Russian Soviet Union leaders at a certain point. So what the president and his team are doing right now, and they're putting an enormous amount of effort into it, is trying to bring both sides together to stop the war and stop the killing. He campaigned on that. It's complicated. You know, it's going to happen in different kind of phases. The first is to get these two sides to the table. That's happening right now. The second is to get a full ceasefire, which the Ukrainians have agreed to. I've played a little bit of a behind-the-scenes role on helping the Ukrainians get to the table with regard to our own negotiators. And the third would be a peace agreement, which, you know, when you talk to the administration, you know, the Secretary Rubio has laid out what the goal is, which would be a peace agreement that secures the long-term sovereignty, prosperity, and security of Ukraine, which I support. None of this is going to be easy. It's going to be very complicated. Putin, in my view, the president has threatened, hey, if Putin doesn't agree to this ceasefire, that we're going to unleash very significant sanctions on him. That was a Trump statement just from about a week ago. I'm working with a bunch of senators on a bipartisan package that would help the president implement that to get Putin to the table with regard to the ceasefire. So it's a complicated set of circumstances. They're putting an enormous amount of effort into it. You know, this minerals deal that the media's been criticizing. I was in the meeting when President Zelensky, this was Zelensky's idea. Zelensky's idea. A lot of people don't know that, right? I was in the meeting when he pitched it to a bunch of senators last fall. And I would say I like to read history. I'm a really slow reader. I've been reading a lot on Russian history in the last couple of years. It's a beautiful country, great people, incredible art, but their leaders are brutal and they're expansionists. In any kind of deal that this administration is trying to put together, and I give them full credit for the effort, full credit, and I could spend 2 hours criticizing the last administration on their approach, but I won't. Any kind of deal is going to need what Ronald Reagan always talked about with the Russians, trust but verify, because I think they're not very trustworthy, and their history is brutal and expansionist, and that's what we're seeing here, because, you know, I think you've heard me say it, they're the country that invaded Ukraine, not the other way around.